Hello everybody and welcome to my bloom tour for March 2021. I love doing bloom tours to just sit back and enjoy all the orchid blooms in my collection. I'm going to give you the IDs of my orchids. Most of them I do have the ID, how long I've had the plant, how many spikes and how many blooms are on each plant. So this should really be fun. And I'm going to give you some grand totals at the end of the video as well. We're going to start the tour off with my miniature Cat Leah. I think I have the ID, but I'm not sure. So I'll place the name in the description box below for you. I've had this gorgeous plant for 18 years and she has 5 spikes and 35 beautiful unicorn blooms. She is hands down a favorite with both my family and my subscribers. I recently did a tutorial on this plant, so if you missed it, I'll place a link to the video in the description box below for you. And I just recently got the ID to this beautiful Phal. A big shout out to Carmela Carey for providing me the ID for this one. It's Phal Purple Dust. This is the orchid that my dad just can't believe it. He didn't think an orchid could bloom like this. She has 2 spikes and 24 blooms, and the color of this one is so intense, and the plant itself is also just beautiful. And I've grown this plant for 4 years. This is my DTPS Brothers Red Caribe. I've had it for 13 years and she is huge. This is the best bloom cycle ever for this plant, and she has 15 blooms on 1 spike that branches. The color of the blooms is intensely red with a narrow white border that frames the blooms. She's just beautiful. Here's a spike of blooms on my huge Dendrobium, no ID. I call him Wilson. As my friend Sharon Holmes puts it, he's the guardian angel of all my orchids. And that's what I think of when I look at this beautiful plant. I actually have him roped up to the window latches to keep him steady. It's kind of funny because when I first got this Dendrobium, it was tiny. He has really come a long way. I've grown all of my Dendrobiums for 4.5 years, and it has been a learning experience. Wilson has 2 spikes and 11 blooms this year. And this is a close-up of one of the blooms on my beautiful Burana Jade Fantasy number 9. I love the blooms on this plant. They are a green with purple. It's just really, really pretty, the play on colors on this one. This plant is also huge. When I bought this one, it was teeny tiny as well. It has 1 spike this year with 12 large blooms on it. I love this plant. It's just magical. I have 2 Fal Sogo Lawrence Tahiti sunsets, and the one on the left has outdone itself this year. It has 2 primary spikes and a secondary spike with 17 huge blooms and buds. It is an extremely healthy plant, as you see, with like 9 leaves. The other Fal Lawrence on the right is growing in sprouted moss, and I had that one in water culture last fall because the root system just gave up and the bottom leaf started to shrivel. And I had this one in water culture for about 3 months, and now it's just doing great. It has a primary spike and a secondary spike with 7 blooms. And this one has been bloomed longer, and the center of the blooms has settled into this pretty pink color. The other one is more of a red color in the center, which I find interesting because they're the same plant. But they're favorites of mine, and I've been growing both of these for 3 years. And here's my African violet frozen in time that so many of you comment on. It's covered with blooms. And the blooms along with these variegated leaves is so pretty. It is a really vigorous little plant. And I've had this one for a year now. And it was just a little baby plant when I first got it. My sister gave this one to me, and I love it. And the light pink bloom that you see here is a close-up of my miniature Dendrobium Salaya Chompu. She is still in bloom. She's been blooming since October. This plant blooms for so long that I actually miss the blooms when she's not in bloom. This is my beautiful Fal Sogo red Poeker, and it is loaded down with blooms. It has 2 primary spikes and 28 blooms. It has a spike just like this on the other side of the plant. I love this cascade of deep red and purple blooms, and I've had this plant for 3 years. And this is my Fal Sogo Vivian. This is my friend Tammy's favorite Phal. And I've had some problems with mine this year with some bud blast and flower blast. When she tried to bloom, it would get really cold and gray, and she lost several buds and flowers. But she has 2 primary spikes and 2 secondary spikes with 24 blooms. If not for the bud blast, this plant would be covered with blooms. So next year, I hope I'm going to get a better result, but she's still beautiful. And here's my pride and joy to share with you today. This is my Phal named after my little buddy. This is Phal speciosa times Equestris Rosia. I've had this plant for 11 years now. My daughter picked it out. She picks out great plants. I didn't have the ID until a few months ago when I just came across it in some pictures I was looking at. So I've had this one for 11 years and I'm just now getting the ID. This plant has 2 spikes with 50 blooms and buds. Yes, 50. This plant speaks to me. It's a favorite. I know I say that a lot, but they all really are. And yes, here is Fal Legato, a fan favorite. I've had Legato for 12 years, and I'm asked about this Phal more than any other orchid in my collection. And I can see why. It's gorgeous. The blooms almost look like they're made of porcelain. She changes color according to how much light is in the room. When the sun hits the blooms, they glow this gorgeous pink. And when there's not as much light, they appear more yellow. It's like a chameleon orchid. She's amazing. This is her best bloom cycle ever with 17 blooms and buds. I'm proud of her. Here's my Phal Star, my miniature white NOID. I used to have the ID for her and I lost it. But this is the best bloom cycle yet, and she has 2 primary spikes and 30 blooms. And it's a beautiful double cascade of blooms. I love this one. And here is a close-up of a bloom on my Phal Xian Chen Diamond. This is actually my daughter's orchid. We've had this one for 3 years, and it has 1 spike and 11 blooms. And this is just an awesome color. The red purple is just so intense. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous Phal. And here's my Phal Magic Art. It has 1 spike and 15 blooms and buds. Each bloom is different, like a different artist painted each one. And the white is a paper white. It's just a perfect canvas for these gorgeous blooms. I'm going to give you a little side note here. My nephew Rich says that I say the word bloom in 2 syllables. I think about that every time I say that word. And if you listen, I do say it in 2 syllables. It's an important word in orchid growing. And I've had magic art for 4 years. And this is my Phal Baldan's Kaleidoscope, and I think that she has outdone herself this year. She has 1 spike that branches and 19 blooms. This is a really good Phal. I've had this one for 14 years and it blooms beautifully every year, and I think it's magical. And this is Phal Brother Pirate King, and he is an overachiever. I've had this plant for 4 years and all the blooms are just perfect. He has 2 primary spikes that are loaded down with 30 blooms, and my husband chose this one for me. This is a very good plant. And here's my Phal Marianne. She is a NOID and she is gorgeous this year with 1 primary spike and a secondary spike and 13 huge blooms. There's just a beautiful, gorgeous peach color to this bloom with that red lip. It's beautiful. And I've had this one for 13 years. And I promised you all some totals at the beginning of the video, so here they are. Right now in my collection, I have 35 spikes and 364 blooms. That's awesome. So I want to thank you all for watching, for being my excellent international orchid family. You all are such a blessing to me. Thanks for your comments and for your friendship. And before I end the video, I'd love to say the blessing over you, your families, and your orchids. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you his shalom peace. You all make it a great day, and we'll see you next time.